Our next presentation will be New Mexico Department of Agriculture's Healthy Soil Program by Goetz and Dean Bruce. And this presentation does have a pre-poll. So if you could go ahead and answer that, that would help us a lot. Thank you.
Doris, we'll go ahead and get started if that's okay with you.
Of course.
Okay, great. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Katie Goetz, and I'm here this morning with Dean Bruce. We both work for the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. My title at the department is Policy Analyst, and that says very little about my involvement with the Healthy Soil Program. We'll talk specifics of the program here in just a moment, but let me turn it over to Dean for an introduction as I pull up some slides.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Again, my name's Dean Bruce. I'm also technically a policy analyst with NMDA, but my primary duty is to work with the soil and water conservation districts as well as the Healthy Soil Program. And so glad to be here today.
All right, I think I've got all my buttons in order. Oh, tough act to follow with Mr. Curry. I think I could have sat through 1,000 more of his photos and as many more of his stories. We're here today, Dean and I are, to talk to you about NMDA's Healthy Soil Program. So we'll take the next 15 or so slides and leave plenty of time for questions at the end. As I said, my name is Katie Goetz, and to think of Dean and us as the co-leads of the program, really my share of things is more the communications and the outreach side. Which there's plenty of work to do on as we go forward with a relatively new program. And Dean is the more technical of the two of us, given his background as a farmer and his many years with NRCS prior to coming on board with NMDA. Okay, WSARE brings to us a pretty broad audience, we hope. So given the wide geography, I wanted to show you all a map of some of the other states that are either contemplating or implementing their own healthy soil programs. You'll see the URL at the bottom of the page, and certainly I can put that in the chat when we wrap up our slides here, but this is just a crowdsourced policy tracker map, courtesy of nerdsforearth.com, and you'll see that NMDA's program is as a result of legislation having passed. So we're going to zoom in, of course, on our home state today. Just a quick snapshot of New Mexico agriculture to kind of root us all in the same place this morning. This data comes from the Census of Agriculture. That's once every 5 years snapshot of agriculture across the country, and it's conducted by USDA, as you might imagine. So just a few quick details here. About 25,000 farms and ranches across New Mexico. Again, you'll see that little asterisk there off to the side. So when we talk about farms, we're pointing back to USDA's definition, which is pretty inclusive. It's any place that produced and sold or normally would have produced and sold at least $1,000 of agricultural products during a given year. So when we say there's 25,000 farms in New Mexico, that's the definition we're pointing at, as places that sold or would have sold $1,000 worth of ag products in a given year. So farms, ranches, you name it, that's what we're talking about here. In total, we're talking about 40 million acres of land tied up in agricultural production. And of that, the vast majority, as you can see, is in pasture land. So that plays into our conceptualization of our program. A third of those farms are relatively small, both in terms of their acreage and also in terms of the dollars and cents produced on those places. And as you can see, the vast majority of sales come from livestock, poultry, and related products. So hopefully that kind of roots us in New Mexico agriculture as we talk about a program that benefits New Mexico agriculture. So the roots of the Healthy Soil Program are relatively shallow in the sense of time. The program was created in 2019 following enactment of the Healthy Soil Act. You can see from that image off to the side, it's 7 pages, but boy, are those pages densely packed. The bill had strong grassroots support, and I'm not sure if anyone from the New Mexico Healthy Soil Working Group is on today's call, but a real tip of the hat to those folks, because they were the real levitating force behind the legislation, and they remain as a good partner to NMDA in keeping energized the community of people who are really interested in healthy soil. And strong bipartisan support for the bill and for related measures that have wended their way through the legislative channels in the years since 2019. I wanted to pull out and highlight for you all the program purpose. And you can see that I've kind of isolated some really important clauses within that purpose. So the first, the program purpose is to promote and support farming and ranching systems and other forms of land management that increase soil organic matter, aggregate stability, microbiology, and water retention to improve the health, yield, and profitability of the soils of the state. So you can see that this program has the potential to benefit a lot of different lands across New Mexico, and really with a scientific focus, ultimately to benefit not just the land, not just agriculture, but really the people as well who are involved in agricultural production. That legislation lays out a few components for the overall Healthy Soil program, including a healthy soil assessment and education program, as well as a healthy soil grants program. That's really the centerpiece of the program for us. And of course, where most of the public interest resides is with the grants piece of the program. We'll talk about that in just a moment. However, the legislation also provides for NMDA to establish other programs as necessary, so long as they fit within that healthy soil scope. So we're going to zoom in on the grants piece for just a bit, and I'll turn it over to Dean in a couple of slides. But the grants, again, the real centerpiece of our program. So I'll talk to you a minute about how the grants are contemplated in the Healthy Soil Act. We hew very, very true to what the legislation says in order to land to what we hope is a good program. The Healthy Soil Act directs us to award grants to eligible entities. So bookmark that phrase in your mind, and we'll visit it in just a moment. But to award grants to eligible entities to provide technical assistance to producers, meaning farmers, ranchers, anyone involved in agriculture, and other land managers as well, to advance soil health principles and implement supported methods. That's really what the legislation says about the grants and how they ought to be distributed. So as defined in the Healthy Soil Act, eligible entities, that's not a notion born of NMDA's brain, that's something that is scripted for us in the legislation. And those eligible entities are local governmental entities with proven land management capacity to support healthy soil. And the Act goes so far as to name for us a few examples of those local governmental entities. Those include nations, tribes, and pueblos. Those include land grants. Eligible entities also include acequias, as well as soil and water conservation districts. Those are parties that we're already well engaged with. And finally, with NMSU's Cooperative Extension Service. And just to go a bit off script here, NMDA is actually part of NMSU. So we have a long-standing and very rich relationship with NMSU that is even furthered through the implementation of our Healthy Soil program. So I mentioned that the grants are to go through those eligible entities to benefit producers. So we invite producers to apply to us too, even if an acequia is not quite ready to apply for a grant, even if a soil and water conservation district is not quite ready to apply for a grant. If someone, some farmer, some rancher resides within that jurisdiction and waves their hand and says, hey, I'm ready, I got a project, we say, well, come on, we've got a way for you to apply for funding, but it's a little more detailed. So when we say individuals, we're talking farmers, we're talking ranchers, we're also talking the businesses where those farmers and ranchers reside. And finally, we've got some nonprofits across New Mexico who themselves are involved in farming and ranching. They too are invited to come play in the sandbox, as it were. So what we tell them is, yes, you can apply for the program. You don't need to own land in order to participate. Just have some relationship to the land. So you can be the manager, you can be the lessee out there, the permittee, however it is, so long as you've got the permission to implement a project on the land, we welcome you to come participate in the program. Those individuals, again, those farmers, those ranchers, those businesses, those nonprofits, we say, come apply for the program, but you need support. You've got to have a fiscal agent in your corner, someone who's going to help keep eyes and ears on the project. So what we ask people to do is to get that support from a soil and water conservation district. There's 47 of them across the state. If you're a member of a tribal community, you've got one of two ways to apply for a program. You can either go to your local SWCD, knock on their door, ask for that project support, or you can turn to your tribal leadership and say, hey, I'm interested in NMDA's Healthy Soil program. I've got a project to improve my soil health. Will you back me? So a couple of different avenues that tribal members have to access our program. And again, what we're looking for here is some organization to provide you the fiscal support you need to receive of those funds, and also to lend you that support in monitoring the project. One of the real goals of the legislation is to build capacity, and not just with our eligible entities, not just within those organizations, but also within our individuals. This is a movement. So those relationships help to foster that increase in knowledge across all parties that participate in our program. And here's where I'll turn it over to Dean. Again, he's the more technical of the two of us, so he'll walk us through some of the more scientific aspects of the program.
Okay, thank you, Katie. As Katie mentioned, in the Act, it is identified for us. We have 5 soil health principles, and these are somewhat of the backbone of it, because as defined in the Healthy Soil Act, we have these 5 principles, and this is the driving force behind how you would put together a project that you want to implement on your land. First one is keeping your soil covered. And then we move on to minimizing soil disturbance on cropland and minimizing external inputs. We have maximizing biodiversity and maintaining a living root. And then we finally finish up with integrating animals into land management, including grazing animals, birds, beneficial insects, or keystone species such as earthworms. And so as we look at those 5 soil health principles, that's where you're going to focus your emphasis as an individual farmer, rancher, land manager in deciding where you want to proceed with your grant program. So we'll move on past that. Okay, and so the question may be, how do you know which soil health principles are appropriate for the land you manage, the land you own, and for the project that you're going to implement? Those soil health principles are identified once you start looking into developing a conservation plan, which we'll talk about. And part of a requirement of the program, of the grant program for individual applicants, is to develop a conservation plan. This conservation plan will help guide you in not only identifying your resource concerns and how you want to proceed with your project, but help you understand what you are dealing with specifically on the land you manage. And so a conservation plan is going to include, at a bare minimum, an aerial photo or diagram of the fields that you manage, a soils map with the accompanying soil map unit descriptions. It's important to understand your inherent soil properties that you are dealing with on the land you manage. Very important criteria is a list of the existing soil health related resource concerns. These are the things that you're going to identify through conservation planning that may be a little bit lacking in your overall soil management plan, and so these are the things that you look to improve. We're also going to ask for a list of your management decisions. What decisions are you going to make based on your identified resource concerns, based on your soils? And so we're going to look for those management decisions. Also, the conservation plan should include the location and schedule for applying some of the conservation practices that you have decided upon in your management plan. So also any accompanying information sheets that will explain how you're going to carry out those specific management decisions, and a plan for operation and maintenance if needed. So that's the bare minimum requirements of a conservation plan. But as an individual farmer, rancher, land manager, a conservation plan will help you identify those resource concerns and then move in a process of implementing practices that will help you address those. So we'll move on. Okay, so here is just a little snapshot of the program up to date, and you can see, I'm not going to go into specific numbers, but you can see we have through the program addressed resource concerns on a wide variety of land uses, both orchards, farms, ranches, community gardens, and also through wildlife habitat restoration projects. And so there's quite a diversity of land uses that have already taken part in this grant program. Some of the most popular practices that we have seen come across and through the grant application process are planting diverse cover crops, reducing or eliminating tillage on farmland, introducing compost or mulch, integrating animals, increasing overall biodiversity, range planting, and developing intensive grazing management plans. And so you can see that's just a quick little snapshot of the things that we have seen in the past. And so it gives you an idea of the type of projects that we may have seen. So we'll move on. And as part of the Healthy Soil Act, there is a soil assessment and education portion offered through this program. We'll talk about that in just a second, because as the Healthy Soil Act directs NMDA to develop a soil assessment and education portion of the overall program, it's often in partnership with others. We want to encourage voluntary soil health measurements, also raise awareness about what are some of those desirable soil health characteristics that, as an individual farmer or rancher, you should shoot for. Facilitate on-site producer-led workshops and training sessions. This allows individual farmers and ranchers to the chance to get out and see what's working, see what others are doing, and also to complete a baseline soil health assessment on the land that's managed to determine where you sit and where you want to go. It also directs us to establish a soil health or a statewide network of soil health champions, and so we've worked on that as well, and provide ongoing training in soil health stewardship and workshop facilitation for both the champions and eligible entities. It also directs us to sponsor soil health workshops, training sessions at research centers and learning sites across the state, and educate students and general public in the overall world of soil health. So we'll move on. As part of the soil health assessment portion of that, at the farm and ranch level, NMDA requires each grantee that participates in the program to either chemically and or biologically test their soil, but also perform physical soil health assessments. These can include infiltration assessments, compaction assessments, aggregate stability. The desire of the program is to educate individual farmers and ranchers on what truly indicates soil health. And so by physically assessing the soil on their project, both before and after, this lends itself to understanding how they can improve the soil health and what constitutes improvement in the first place. At a state level, NMSU's Cooperative Extension Service and other partners are periodically sampling soil at various sites throughout New Mexico to gauge soil health and develop those baseline indicators throughout the state. As far as the education portion, NMDA has contracted with NMSU's Cooperative Extension Service to train the trainers in fundamentals of soil health, and as well as conduct those long-term soil health research throughout the state, and create a New Mexico specific soil health manual for TSPs or technical service providers to provide that specific New Mexico related soil health information to individuals across the state. We've also supported other complementary efforts to create soil health curricula, producer level soil health manuals, and other audiovisual materials as necessary to further the soil health related efforts across the state. So we'll move on. As we begin to think about our program and how we can continue to develop this program to the benefit of soil health across the state, we look to constantly refine the grant program. We want to increase support for a baseline soil health assessment statewide. as well as increased support for a statewide network of champions. Those soil health champions throughout the state provide a great benefit to others because they can have that direct person-to-person contact that provides some of the best networking and informational transfer across the state, as well as in-person training opportunities when travel and meeting restrictions will allow that. So that's kind of where we are shooting for with the soil health program. And I believe at this point, we will open it up for questions if there are any, and we will make our best effort to answer them as we can.
Hi, yes, thank you. So first we will go ahead and turn on the post-presentation poll. So you can go ahead and start answering those. And your first question is, what percent of the applicants get grants versus how many apply?
I don't have a figure offhand, but I will tell you that there was tremendous interest that first year, upwards of $1 million worth of project funding requested. And what we were able to award in that first year was less than 200,000. The funding has increased. We're just in our third year of having granted project requests, and there's talk of increased funding coming our way. So what we really want to get out the door in terms of our messaging to potential applicants is, yes, it's a competitive process, but we welcome all manner of projects so long as they're rooted in the soil health principles. If you're an individual, make sure you've got a conservation plan in place, and also find that eligible entity that is going to support you in the implementation of these one-year grants. I realize I'm not answering the question because I don't have that data offhand, but what I can say is the demand has been greater than the funding level initially, and with increased funding on the way, we welcome all manner of applicants.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. The next question is, the New Mexico Department of Agriculture connected to or collaborating other states on their healthy soil programs? If yes, can you talk about successful aspects of those other national programs?
I can't speak to that. Maybe Dean has something else he wants to offer to this, but in terms of collaborations with other states, we have been paying attention to other states and their implementation of similar programs, particularly California, because they're so many years advanced in their program implementation. Our funding level is just a mere drop in the bucket compared to what California is able to shake at its program. But I think there's good things at other programs that maybe we could avail ourselves of. Right now it's Dean and me working on the program, and so we've pulled in other members of our team within NMDA, and also looked outside of our building's four walls to really inform what it is we're able to do here in New Mexico. So I really want to give a shout out. I see John Idowu on the call this morning, and there might be others in the participant list I'm not able to see at the moment, but we've made sure to pull in our eligible entity communities to help inform our program as we've implemented and tried to make improvements to it. So we've looked to members of the acequia world, the land grant world, the tribal world, the districts, and also cooperative extension to say, hey, we've got this program, we've got a lot of different ways to access the program in terms of applicant type. Help us get better. So yes, we do see those programs outside of New Mexico, but really what we're concerned with is making sure that all of those New Mexico parties that can apply for a grant have offered us information as to how we can make our program accessible and robust at the same time.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Next question, could livestock producers with grazing allotments on the national forest be eligible? How much funding is available for each project / budget limits?
As far as the national forest allotments, that's probably a question we're going to have to look into further. The applicant pool so far has been primarily private land, and so that would be a question we might have to answer at a later time. But as far as your second question, could you repeat that second question again?
Yes, sorry. Let me go ahead and find it. Oh, how much funding is available for each project?
I think I might let Katie address that one.
As I said earlier, we're anticipating possible increases in funding, so it could be in flux for that reason. I can point to last year's specifications and speak from there. So last year, what we made available for each of our individually implemented projects was just under $20,000. On the flip side of the coin, we're talking about those organizationally implemented projects, the ones implemented by the land grants, implemented by the acequias, the districts, extension, the tribal communities. And for those organizations, we set the limit at just beneath $25,000. But still, we're discussing possibly a change in those limits, especially if there's going to be increased funding coming to the program. And I would say, just as a general rule of thumb for our applicants who might be lessees, permittees on land controlled by other parties, check in with your land management agency or the owner of that land. And so long as you have the permission to implement a project that could be surface disturbing per various organizations' definitions, then that's an application we would be willing to consider.
Okay, great. And we have time for one more question. Can you clarify how a conservation program can be developed without having a baseline?
As far as a conservation program, that's why we stress, and maybe I'm answering this in the right way, but that's why we stress the development of a conservation plan ahead of time, so that you can determine what baseline soil health you currently have on the land that you manage. And so we encourage the development of a conservation plan to establish that baseline. And then once that baseline is established, then you can begin to determine what necessary practices might be included to improve your overall soil health. Not exactly sure if I answered that question correctly, but if I need to speak on it a little further, I can try.
I think we're good for now. Thank you to the both of you. Well, we'll go ahead now and move on to our next presenter.
Sure. And
oh, sorry.
Doris, I'm sorry, I just wanted to flag for everyone's attention. I'll be dropping a link to the Healthy Soil Program webpage in the chat, and hopefully everyone can bookmark it so that as we make program specifications more concrete for the FY23 cycle, people can go and get that information and be thinking about their projects and be ready to apply. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that.